want to talk to you about this very, very, very important story right now. If Jess Phillips really cares about the victims and survivors of Pakistani rape gangs, then she'd do the decent thing and resign. There are 4 key reasons why. Number 1, it's all about her. Jess Phillips has an uncanny ability to make everything all about her. Here she is, pulling some faces there when people dared to question her about the government's initial decision to not want a Pakistani rape gang inquiry. Oh, and the anger built. Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah, really good stuff. It's all about her. Then here she is again, performatively kicking off in the House of Commons the other day when people questioned why the inquiry has turned into a total car crash.
But the fact of the matter is that there is absolutely no council in this country who will tell this inquiry where it can and cannot go. I have said that 1,000,000 times from this dispatch box, and yet the same thing gets peddled again and again.
5 victims and survivors quit the inquiry, saying that she has to go. And then today, 5 others have come out and said that they'll only stay if she stays. But let's be honest, it's become the Jess Phillips show, hasn't it? Which actually, judging by some of these pictures, I imagine she quite likes. You know, we've got Jess in the spotlight there. Brilliant stuff. What, gosh, Jess on a bed of roses. Oh, would you look at that? I mean, that collection of images there from various different self-indulgent news articles would indicate to me that we're dealing with someone who quite likes the limelight. OK, so why else should she quit? Reason number 2. She's accused some of the rape gang survivors of spreading misinformation and untruths. She may as well have called them liars. That's how they feel. She said that their claims that the inquiry was going to be broadened out beyond Pakistani rape gangs were, quote, untrue. Well, then the survivors produced actual evidence to prove that it was true and that Jess Phillips knew about it. Thirdly, she appears unable to acknowledge that men from certain cultures are more likely to sexually abuse women. For example, the Cologne sex attacks, where 1,200 women and girls were raped or sexually assaulted on a single night by mostly men of North African and Arab appearance. By the way, that also happened on the same night in Hamburg, Stuttgart, Frankfurt and Dortmund, all on that same evening, all by very similar-looking men. How did Jess Phillips respond to that?
There is violence against women and girls that you are describing. A very similar situation to what happened in Cologne could be described on Broad Street in Birmingham every week, where women are baited and heckled.
Yeah. And then, when data revealed that Afghan men were 20 times more likely to commit a sexual assault than British men, she didn't seem to want to accept that either.
I mean, like, I have to look across all of this data and think about where I have to really focus and target resources on the prevention work that I am determined to do.
Do you think there are people in this country who have a culturally very, very different view of women and therefore are more likely to be engaged in these kinds of activities?
Which culture doesn't have patriarchy and misogyny in it? Because...
Do you think?
No, I mean, like, I have seen victims and perpetrators from every single walk of life.
If she can't confront a basic reality, then how on earth can we expect her to get to the bottom of the Pakistani rape epidemic? And this leads me on to the 4th reason that she should quit. I think she is compromised by the demographics of her own parliamentary seat. Birmingham Yardley is 45.1% Muslim. Most Muslims in Birmingham come from Pakistan, specifically from an area of Pakistan called Mirpur or Kashmir. This is where many of the rape gangs are from. Jess Phillips nearly lost her seat at the last election to a pro-Gaza candidate whose campaigners she accused of intimidatory tactics and vile misogyny.
We'll carry on with my speech. I understand that a strong woman standing up to you is met with such reticence. Can you throw them out?
Excuse me.
Gosh, why is it met with such reticence, Jess? Could it be, I don't know, maybe a bit cultural? She quit the Labour front bench once over the Gaza issue, and when this happened in her constituency...
Community leaders have been speaking to the police as well because...
Hey, yo, free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Right. I think, apologies for the language you're hearing, but a sense of the anger, I think you can hear there.
Yeah, Katie.
Jess Phillips said that those men of Asian or Pakistani appearance were only out on the streets because of, quotes, misinformation about the far right turning up. She later apologised for that tweet, but that's all right then. Was it misinformation that caused some of them to do this as well? Yeah. She is predicted to lose her seat at the next election to a pro-Gaza candidate. I put it to you that any MP who is so utterly reliant on the Pakistani Muslim vote should be nowhere near an inquiry into rape gangs of predominantly Pakistani Muslim men. When you add all that together, I think the reasonable conclusion is that Jess Phillips has to go. Have you had a random call lately from a strange number, maybe trying to sell you something or even scam you? If so, your info could be out there. That's because of data brokers, shady companies that scrape the internet for your personal details and sell them to marketers or even scammers. These days, scammers can even use AI to mimic your friends' voices and trick you into sending money. It's not just annoying. Data brokers often target vulnerable people with high-interest loans or sketchy offers. But there is a solution. Incogni, the sponsor of this video. Incogni contacts data brokers on your behalf and requests your info be deleted from their databases. And because your data can keep popping up, Incogni keeps sending removal requests to make sure it stays gone. They've just launched a new unlimited plan with custom removals. If you find your info on a weird website, just send them the link and their privacy team will work to get it taken down. Getting started is easy. Hit the link in the description, create your account and let Incogni handle the rest. It's risk-free for 30 days and you'll get 60% off an annual plan with the code GBNews. Take back control of your data with Incogni. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. We've got political commentator Chloe Dobbs, Tory peer Lord Bailey, former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Look, Shauna, I'll start with you. Do you think that she has to go? Where are you on this?
I think there's two things I say. Jess Phillips has really let herself down. I remember when she made a vociferous attack on Rishi Sunak, saying he hadn't done anything and he didn't care and we needed a Labour government to fix it. She is now that Labour government and she could be accused of not doing anything when she really does have the power. And I think the real shame as well, she has potentially driven a wedge between the survivors, how the survivors have been able to support each other to take this very brave step to give up their unanimity and come out publicly and face this, and then she has somehow, maybe inadvertently, driven a wedge between them, I think is a problem. And yes, because some of them have lost faith in her, she does need to step back. What she does have on her side, though, is that Keir Starmer is in far too weak a position to do anything about it now. He could not get rid of any of his frontbenchers. She will be there. And I think she needs to look at herself. If you saw her response in the House of Commons, in the other place, her behaviour was certainly not that of a minister, and I don't think she covered herself in glory at all. And there'll be many people who used to be Jess Phillips supporters who will now think, you know what, she's gone too far. Yeah,
well, indeed. I've actually just had a message from someone saying that Jess Phillips there saying she's screamed her message 1 million times. Apparently that would have been 274 times a second. 274 times a day since 2015. Someone making a joke that maybe she's got Diane Abbott doing the maths on that one. But does she have to go? Will she not go? Because really what we need to accept is this is all really about Jess Phillips.
I think that there is a big conflict of interest with Jess Phillips, and I think it's a great shame given that she is someone who has been so passionate about helping the survivors of rape and sexual assault. But I think that she is completely unwilling to accept the reality that is that British Pakistani Muslim men are overrepresented in the data. And that is what we really want to dig into in this national inquiry. I think Labour are unwilling to face it, but particularly Jess Phillips, because, as you say, her seat, she won that on a knife edge. She won by only about 600 votes, a slight change in the voting intention, and she is going to lose her seat. And I think it's also a broader problem with a lot of feminists that they are all about talking about keeping women and girls safe, unless it is goes against their worldview about immigration, for example, or if it's trans women, i.e. biological men, going into women's spaces, suddenly they are dead silent about this. And you see it when it's a migrant from a hotel has sexually assaulted a girl, they're dead silent about it. And with the grooming gangs, they're unwilling to admit the link between the Pakistani Muslim community and these crimes.
Well, I'll put that to you, Matthew, which is that if you ask any normal thinking member of the public out there what this inquiry really is about, it really is about getting to the bottom of the true scale of the Pakistani rape gang epidemic. That really, I think most people out there were of the impression that that's the point of this inquiry. Jess Phillips does not seem able to acknowledge that certain people from certain cultures are more likely to commit sex offences, and she is also dependent utterly on the Pakistani Muslim vote in her constituency. Surely for those two reasons alone, she should be nowhere near this.
Well, look, I don't think that Jess Phillips is the most important thing about this inquiry. I think that the survivors are the most important thing about this inquiry, and getting the answers that they deserve and that they haven't had, and indeed we as a society haven't had for so long, is the answer. And what I think the government needs to do is get on and appoint a chair, taking into account everybody, all the stakeholders, to use that phrase, which is predominantly the survivors, but also the other people involved, and get a chair and get this inquiry going and let it go anywhere it needs to do and speak to everybody it needs to do, because this inquiry is based on what Louise Casey came up with. The government was too hesitant before she came up with her conclusions to do a national inquiry. It rightly went along with what Louise Casey said, and it needs to get on with doing it in this way. And that does acknowledge that the Louise Casey report does acknowledge that this is a problem where Asian men of Pakistani heritage are clearly massively represented.
Able to acknowledge that, though, and that's the problem. I mean, is she not going to have one eye on the next election here?
Firstly, this is based on what GB News said. It was GB News who first called for an inquiry, and it was GB News who blew this story up, and it's GB News who pressed that. And by the time Louise Casey had come in, that's because the government had been forced, but been dragged to the altar on this one. So let's get that very clear. They never wanted an inquiry. And why that's important, because it sets the stage for Jess Phillips' behaviour, and it sets the stage for the government's behaviour. When the government says it's going to take months and months and months to find a chair, what they're saying is we're delaying. Now, one could easily come to the conclusion that the government are delaying it for their own purposes because they didn't want an inquiry in the first place. That wouldn't be an unreasonable conclusion to draw, would it now? Because in this country...
Pull out the two candidates, Sean.
Hold on.
Oh, I thought you liked interrupting.
Two things to say. We have a Prime Minister who prides himself on knowing the law. So, therefore, he should be able to set up an inquiry very quickly. We are a country who's awash with inquiries. We're expert in inquiries. So why is this inquiry taking so long to set up when we technically know what we're doing? It feels like politics.
There were several candidates who withdrew, and the government didn't force the withdrawal of either of those candidates. The government, I think, rather wishes that one of them had persevered and that agreement had been reached on that. But it was because it's so contentious, and you can understand the sensibilities, that the survivors didn't want somebody who had a background either in policing or in social services. Now, as we've seen, some of the survivors don't want a judge to run this, and actually that's what was originally said in the Casey report, that it was to be a different sort of inquiry. I mean, frankly, whoever was in charge of... Let's just remind ourselves, Jess Phillips is not going to be chairing this inquiry. She is not going to make the decisions in the inquiry. That will be done by the independent chair, who the government needs to get on collectively and appoint.
But you've made the point that there are the chairs that were on the shortlist, they have resigned, but why does it need to take several months for them to find somebody else? There's no sense of urgency.
Nobody wants to do it.
And in this debate as to whether we should...
Put your application in.
Anyway, we'd all do... I'm sorry, but would we not all do it?
I bet you the thing about having a judge, right? A judge would be able to stand aside from the controversy. Judges are used to dealing with this. The House of Lords is full of judges who could take this on.
Sean, I agree with you, or rather agree with you, but a lot of the survivors don't want a judge because they feel they were let down by the legal system, and that the legal system is as tainted as either... Can I finish? Hold on. As either, as you would say, is either the legal system is tainted as much as the police or social services. So who do you get to chair it?
Have a judge on the shortlist, and then the survivors can question without having to submit their questions.
I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. And let's just remember, when the Tories did the last inquiry, they had to search the world. Somebody came from New Zealand, then they quit, then somebody else quit, and that was equally difficult because it's a minefield.
But that's the whole point, isn't it? The government have stated it will take months and months and months. That suggests they're not putting effort. They should go to New Zealand.
I don't think the government's putting any lack of effort in this.
They should pull out every stop to make this happen.
That's just nonsense.
Well,
absolute nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose... the the thing is that Jess Phillips is of a certain bracket of people in society which are called the Believe All Women Brigade, OK? And then to come out and essentially, as some of the victims and survivors feel, accuse them of lying is really quite bad.
When they've lived a whole life of being told that they're lying.
Remember, some of them have said they will only stay on the panel if she stays. It's a very complicated issue.
They have. OK, well, a Home Office spokesperson said this. The grooming gang scandal was one of the darkest moments in this country's history. That is why this government is committed to a full statutory national inquiry to uncover the truth. It's the very least that the victims of these hideous crimes deserve. The Home Secretary has been clear there will be no hiding place for those who abuse the most vulnerable in our society.